the AL and NL champs. It is the Texas Rangers, and their model was to go out and spend big and buy talent and buy success. Primarily, that's how they've done it. And then on the opposing side, you have the Arizona Diamondbacks, one of the newest teams in Major League. They've not been to the playoffs since the early 2000s. And they built their team largely on player development and making smart but kind of under-the-radar trades. They spend... as far as budgets go, they're about 21st out of 30 teams. The Rangers are... Where are they right now? 4th, I think, out of the 30 teams. 3rd? 4th, somewhere right in there. So, two different approaches. The Rangers, a powerful, powerful offense. They hit the long ball. And the Diamondbacks are steal, run, get the extra bag, athletic. So, opposing types of... an old school manager, too, for the Rangers. So, it'll be good. Hey, it's considered a soap opera. That's what it is, Fatty. If you like series, right? Like serial podcasting, right? You like that type of thing. The World Series and the playoffs for that are the same thing. It is two of the same teams meeting on, frequently over the span of a week, and they're kind of their little soap opera just plays out over and over. So it's cool.
If you say so, man.
And there's data. There's data.
I do like the data.
Yeah.
Yes. Our audience loves the data.
Yeah. So I've made my pitch to both of you to watch the World Series.
It was a good pitch.
Was that
a
pitch
good
successful as far as you're concerned, Josh? Are you watching the World Series now?
I don't even have a TV, so
it's streaming.
It's not even an option. But
I'll send you text messages as
okay.
The play's going out.
All right. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start recording.
Yep.
Well, I've been recording on for the YouTubers, so they heard they heard Hottie's pitch as well.
Okay.
I am now recording on Audition.
And it's AJ. What is this? AJ number 32. Cool. Oh, there's a plane going overhead.
We love
okay.
That's like special effects.
Special aircraft effects, huh?
You recording, Hottie?
I am recording.
Do you need to do a countdown before we start on the bonus YouTuber question?
Sure.
Here we go.
That. Is that me?
Oh, yeah. It wouldn't be right if someone else did.
Marginal Gains Podcast countdown in 5, 4,
3,
2, 1.
1.
Give myself a little more gain there, too. Okay.
All right. It's me. I get to start.
Okay.
So, Josh, one of my favorite things about the questions we get from our Marginal Gains listeners is you can tell they have done their homework. They've given their questions some thought. They generally take a stab at the answer, and they show their work. So here is a question from Evan in Portland. Guys, buckle up. He says, I used to race UCI cyclocross where they measure tire width for each race, and therefore I always have run 33 millimeter cross tires on my race bikes. However, now I race mostly local races, and there's no limit to the width of my tire. Is there any data or general rule of thumb on cyclocross tire width? Should I be running wider tires like gravel racers do? I'm not a gravel racer, and I've never taken part. I would imagine the wider tires, if I can fit them, would be faster in some scenarios, but I also know that cyclocross is raced at faster speeds for shorter times, in my case, an hour. Keep in mind, so here's where the homework part comes in. He's doing his homework. There's never enough time in a cross race to do any testing, and my goals are speed, not comfort, with no large concern for grip as modern cyclocross tires are designed so well. Is there any data I could look to for guidance? When I input 33 millimeter high quality tires and category 4 gravel in the SILCA tire pressure calculator, I get a 44 PSI recommendation, which is almost double my typical 20 to 24 PSI for cross races. I guess what I am asking, we get to the question at the long of this math problem is, will SILCA ever develop a cross-specific calculation setting? So there is a lot to unpack there, Josh.
Yeah. Gosh, that's an awesome question and very well formulated. So well done on that. Yeah, the thing with cyclocross that makes it so unique is the multitude of surfaces, and really, in most cases, you think if you've got some sort of like mud section, sand section, and those would be what we consider deformable surfaces. And we don't, the SILCA tire pressure calculator doesn't have any deformable surface data. But the rule of thumb from the old school cyclocross guys of, keep going down until you bottom out at some point on the course, and then, maybe up 1 PSI and you're done. That really holds. And the reason that why that works is that, deformable surfaces, particularly sand is probably the best example. Sand is like a 100% hysteresis surface, right? Like you sinking into the sand, that is pure loss. You're never getting any of that back. And so, taking a tire from 90-something% efficiency to, 80% efficiency to increase the footprint over the sand is a huge net win, because that tire is still darn efficient, and you're offsetting, or you're getting less surface deformation, which is 100% loss. He does mention that the modern cross tires are designed so well for grip, but grip is the other thing that comes into play there. That grip on rough and potentially deformable surfaces, and even grass is a surface with really interesting behavior, because it's essentially the grass itself you can think of as like a pure hysteresis or a pure loss part of the surface. It's just the grass is over top of harder surface, so you have sort of a mathematical average of the two, but it's still really high loss surface, especially if it's tall. So the grip that you're afforded at those lower pressures and the much bigger contact patch is worth it. I think if you ran your cross tires at 40 psi, you would find grip is absolutely a problem over a ton of surfaces. Cross I continue to look at as a real outlier. I think there's still definitely an art form to finding the right cross pressure, and most riders have their method, and generally I would say those methods are pretty good. Back to the very top part of the question, yeah, absolutely. Bigger tires will be faster, almost certainly, and if you have a mud section or a sand section, then the bigger the tire, the better. Again, you're actually overall slightly lowering rolling resistance with that bigger tire, and you're dramatically improving things when you're in on those deformable surfaces. The one thing about cross that's interesting, though, that you have to think about is, weight in a cross bike and the clearance on the cross bike become really important, particularly with mud, that you're shouldering the bike, and so you want to make sure that you have enough clearance that the tires can clean and shed mud, but also you do want to think about bike weight, that you go 15 millimeters wider on a tire and add a couple 100 grams, that there's going to be more penalty of that when you're shouldering and lifting and swinging and doing all the other stuff that you do with the bike when you're dismounted.
Yeah,
so, love the question.
Yeah.
How about the centripetal force issue? With cross, it seems like it's even more of a problem than most things, because you are starting and stopping so often, and every time you ramp up to speed, there is an extra energy cost. Is the wider tire, is there a price to pay there?
Theoretically, but it's small. I think when you really look into the math on it, I certainly grew up in a world, and I'm sure you guys did too, where it was the mass of your wheel and tire are twice as important. And the reality is that the acceleration component, the rotational inertia and its effects on acceleration, are an order of magnitude below the importance of just the mass itself. And so, the rotational mass isn't twice as important as static mass. It's really more like 1.1 times. So it's definitely a thing. And if you were to put 800-gram tires on there, you would absolutely feel them. But they in reality don't end up slowing you down or being quite as important, as we were brought up to believe that they were. The other thing that with cross, you are doing a lot of starting and stopping, but the actual accelerations in terms of like the G's of acceleration are quite low because the speeds are quite low. So you're not trying to go. You're not a drag racer trying to go from 0 to 100. You're going from 0 to 9. But yeah, all those things do add up, and I think you would. The solution there would actually be really quite complicated. You think if you take a cyclocross course, you could probably like shred it down into hundreds of little vectors, and solve it piecewise. Like, okay, this little section we're running, this little section we're hopping on the bike, we're descending, we're braking. It would be very, very hard to model, but for like a world championships or something, I'm sure you could do it and find that there's going to be some balance there. Because again, a lot of those things you are going to be offsetting with a generally lower rolling resistance.
Man, you are not wrong about having. Oh, sorry, Heidi. Yeah, you're not wrong at all about having grown up with having it pounded into our heads that the outside of your wheel is the most important weight on your bike. I really, for 25 years, treated the tire as like the place that you most wanted to save weight, and now you're saying that it's not true. I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know what to believe anymore.
Well, it's true. It's just not as true as we were told. Yeah, as true as we were told.
Yeah, so I acted like that was just like, what just your tires. If you have heavy tires, if you've got big, that was the place. That was the place where you saved weight above all else. And it's crazy that it's not that important.
I will say to that point though, the thing that we were inadvertently doing by going with the lightest possible tires was going with lower rolling resistance tires. And so that I think is probably a big part of what continued to feed that and a total lack of data, but continued to feed that belief that you go to these much lighter tires and you're faster because of this inertia thing. Well, actually you're faster because the rolling resistance is much better, and the inertia thing is just this sort of like little bit of icing on the cake, sort of a thing. But as we know now, lighter tires have less rubber, less fewer casing plies, generally less hysteresis. And so, yeah, I think we were doing the right thing for generally the wrong reason for all that time. But
I just built up a cross bike myself, so this question is perfectly timed there, Evan. I have 40s on my cross bike, Josh, and the one thing I did notice right away, did some cross practice in some grass, and the tire started picking up grass, and suddenly, there goes a lot of my clearance, like pretty quick, because the grass is wet, and that can happen in a lot of cross races. You end up in wet grass quite a bit. The other thing I did notice too, Josh, is like, with a bigger tire, your contact patch changes. That means your trail changes, and I would assume that means the handling characteristics of the bike change. In other words, one of the important things in cross is you be able to go from leaning the bike right to left, and you're constantly, tilting the bike left to right to make your turns. Is it correct? Are my feelings correct in that the bike is a little slower to make those left to right transitions?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think from a trail and handling perspective, it probably is going to slow the handling down a little bit. How much, that's hard to say. You'd have to try it and ride it. But yeah, you're definitely changing the geometry of the bike from the intended geometry with a move that big, right? I think, most of the cross bikes out there are probably, from the day that 33 has been the rule for a while, but 32s were popular for a long time, and so I think a lot of the classic cross geometry, and especially anything older than a couple years old, would have been designed around that 32, and maybe you couldn't even get a 40 in it. honestly haven't looked much at cross bikes the last 4 or 5 years. But
You have.
But flip side of that, the modern bikes. I mean, I think everything's going wider. Everybody knows that wide is the future, and so I gotta think everything 2021 onward is going to have some level of thought put into hey, somebody's going to buy this thing and put bigger tires on it.
Yeah, and the good news, too, is that USA Cycling, UCI is still sticking to the 33 rule, but USA Cycling has allowed for some leeway here. Like, you're allowed to run 40s in most races, not for national championships, but 40s are fine for most local races. So unless the local organizer wants to suddenly turn into a UCI-type event, it's fine. You show up with your gravel tires, and no one's going to kick you out of the race, which is great. So love the leeway.
Fantastic question, Evan. Thank you so much. What do you say, guys? Let's get to what we're going to call the real show, the everyone show.
The everyone show.
Let's do it.
This is the Marginal Gains Podcast. Ask Josh Anything, number 32. We're jumping right into your questions. And in fact, this is the second question we're getting to if you're listening on YouTube, or the first question if you're with us on the audio side of things.
Yep, it's worth checking out for bonus question on the YouTube channel if you didn't know it was there. And I have to say, the bonus question was really a good one this week.
We're going to have everyone over on YouTube eventually and watching this incredibly visual show. So here is a near and dear topic for a lot of our listeners, chain waxing, but not in the way you would expect. Alan in Provo, Utah, so just about 15 miles away from me, asks, I'm a motorcycle rider, and since I'm thoroughly convinced of chain wax on my bikes, I wonder about chain wax for my motorcycle. Do you recommend it? How would I apply it? I'm not sure even how to take a motorcycle chain off.
Oh, that's a great one. We actually get that in our inbox probably once or twice a week. So it's fun to see the overlap between cycling and motorcycling. Motorcycle chains are what we would call O-ring style chains, or some of the higher end ones, X-ring style chains. And essentially that means that you've got a seal in between around the pin, essentially, between the inner and outer plate of every single link of the chain. So motorcycle chains are essentially lubricated for life from the factory because these O-rings hold in the factory grease. Now, you still generally do apply some lube to them to help keep them quiet, and that's that you're trying to fill the gap on the outside of the O-ring between the inner and outer plates where the lube can freely come off. So we have a lot of customers that do it. You just use super secret on it so that you don't have to take it off and hot wax it. But even if you did take it off and hot wax it, you would not be getting hot wax down where you would want the wax to go because the O-rings are taking care of that. So the other application that we get a lot of, and we actually have sold quite a bit of product to, is go-kart racing and shifter kart racing. And it's a short chain. It's exposed to a ton of force, and it's right over the ground, and so it's kind of just getting sprayed with dirt and stuff off the track. And so, those chains are typically not O-ring chains. They're essentially motorcycle chains, but non-O-ring style. And so for go-kart racing, you can hot wax, and it works really well.
Fantastic. So from bikes to motorcycles to go-karts, I think we have officially, finally exhausted the topic of waxing chains and marginal gains.
Oh, I don't know, Fatty. I've heard Hottie's upcoming 3-hour special on why F1 cars should have chains so that they can then wax them. So maybe we need that to just be a separate podcast. The F1
spin-off
related.
The Marginal Gains podcast is presented by SILCA Exquisite Pumps. I changed the wording on that. I think exquisite is better than fine.
I like
pumps.
it. I like it.
Wax chains, aero socks, titanium dropper hangers, bike computer mounts, and cleats. bike cleaning products, and more, and that is just on my mountain bike. Guys, I am Eldon Nelson, also known as Fatty.
And I'm Michael Houghton, High to Most, Marginal Gains, also supported by Shimano. Shimano is well known for its innovations in drivetrains. They're the company that really brought electronic shifting to a wider audience and 12-speed Di2 shifting across the spectrum, from 105 to Ultegra and Durace. Shimano also has sister brands the company simply calls Pro, where you can find saddles, bars, stems, bags, and more, and Laser helmets. Laser has its own anti-rotational impact system called Kineticor. Fatty and I both have been wearing Laser helmets, and we love the fit and feel.
Yep. Check out Shimano at bike.shimano.com and Laser helmets at lasersport.com. And of course, Shimano is very well known for their Q's Di2 bike system, which makes for a very nice commute and also happens to lead us to a great question from Jared in Northern California. He texted us this question, 317-343-4506. First of, I think, 20, 30 times. We're going to mention that number during this episode. Here's what he has to say. For the bike commuter, what is the most aero and comfortable way to transport a modest amount of gear, laptop, lunch, change of clothes? Is it a backpack, a messenger bag, panniers, a rear rack, handlebar basket, or something else? Josh, this pretty much perfectly describes what I carry in my bike commute. And I'm embarrassed to say I've never even considered marginal gaining my commute. I just sort of put everything in this super old Banjo Brothers messenger bag I've had for 17 years. How can Jared and I do better?
Oh my, that's an awesome question. And I too commute by bike. And I carry all of those things and Rico, our 12-pound Pomeranian mix shop dog who comes to work every day. So
do you have goggles for him? I understand you need to get goggles for your dog.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't have goggles, but he is already blind.
Okay.
So which I think I honestly think helps with the commute, because he just like it's like that scene from Titanic, on the front of the boat. He just like sticks his face into the wind and he just loves it. But I think that he can't see the cars and the traffic is probably a good thing for me because he's just oblivious to it.
But all Rico, the smells.
Man. Oh, and the smells. Yeah. I love it. He barks at exactly the same spot in our route every day. That is like probably 300 meters from our house. And I feel like it's got to be a smell thing. Like every day he lets out this little happy yelp as we pass the same spot. But for him, I have a handlebar bag on my, I have a Canyon e-bike that I commute on. And so I've got this kind of big square handlebar bag thing that he sits in. It has a little leash for him and has a little drawstring that can keep his little body in there. It's pretty cute little bag that I found on Amazon of all places, because I don't know of any like legit bike bag brands that make a small dog carrier for your e-bike. But if you're on YouTube, we can put that. I'll put a link to it below. It's really a fun thing. I personally commuted before I had this bike. I used the backpack and the messenger bag and was not a fan of either of them. And so with this one, I have a rear rack and panniers, and oh my God, what an improvement. You don't get the sweaty back. Your bags don't get wet. And so I actually have some of the Ortlieb waterproof panniers. They're super reflective. And I actually just put my whole backpack in one, and then my change of clothes and lunch and whatever in the other one, Rico in the front, roll out the door. It's super easy. I think, from an aero perspective, like a rear rack with like a little box on top is probably your best bet for like aero speed. But honestly, from a ease of use, man, you just cannot beat panniers. So that would be, if your bike can take a rack and panniers, that would far and away be my recommendation.
But terrible aerodynamically, right? The rear, the box on the back is better because you're going to have better flow attachment back there.
Yeah. The box on back, if it's not too big and sits up, it's basically drafting your thighs, there's, to some extent the panniers, they're occasionally drafting your feet and lower legs, but they're sticking out in the wind. They are not good for aero, but that's why you need to get an e-bike, because then you don't care.
Right.
You just have that little button. Mine has the Bosch, I think it's a Bosch motor, and it has colors, and so I just go from blue to purple if I'm going too slowly.
Hey, we're happy to welcome Perk Coffee as a sponsor to the Marginal Gains podcast. I got my samples recently, and Josh, you've been starting your days with Perk Coffee. Tell us what you like about the brand.
Oh gosh, so I met Alan, the owner of Perk, a few years back, and super guy, hardcore cyclist. Funny, he actually had just talked to him. He was had raced against Zav Disley from our show of a couple of weeks ago at Masters Worlds. So great guy, unbelievable coffee nerd. And, being me, if I'm going to get into something, I generally get in pretty deep. Coffee is one of those things. And so when we met, we were fast friends. And he is even a bit overly marginal gainy and nerdy on the coffee thing for me. So that says a lot. But yeah, they specialize in, bringing really unique specialty coffees, hand roasting them. They're in Savannah, Georgia. So, home of the Savannah College of Art and Design. They've got like the most amazing packaging, graphic design. And they are just phenomenal coffee nerds. So, we hit it off, and I have been drinking Perk coffee for, probably the last, year plus, mostly. And then maybe my favorite thing about them is that, and this would sound crazy, but they make an amazing instant coffee in a little pouch that you can take anywhere and make a cup, in your whatever crappy hotel room you're in before the race or the race expo or whatever. Yeah. So I love that because with as much traveling as I do, probably 150 days a year on the road, you just can't always guarantee that you can get a reasonable cup of coffee. So I take the Perk instance with me.
I got the little sample set that Perk sent us. I got it yesterday. I am drinking the Ethiopia blend instant right now because that was my interest as well, for more or less the same reason. I race, and on the morning of the race, it is tough to get yourself a decent cup of coffee. Believe it or not, I was in Italy on vacation, and that was one of the hardest things. There was no place for me to get a good espresso or cup of coffee in the morning when it was time for me to get out the door. You would think in Italy it would be easy, but no, absolutely not. I would absolutely bring this with me. You can bet that I am going to be bringing several envelopes of a Perk along with me for races going forward. And it is worth noting for our listeners, they are doing gift boxes now, and our listeners can get 15% off their first order just by using the code MG15. So go to perkcoffee.com/discount/MG15, or just go to perkcoffee.com and remember to use that MG15 code at checkout.
All right, Josh, if you probably remember a few episodes ago, we included a question from D. Sweet of San Fernando, California, who had an intriguing question about the hour record on the moon. Well, this episode, he got another question for us. It was a great one. Many challenges on the moon, mostly the dust probably up there, but other things too. But he's got another question for us, a little more reality-based this time, and he left a voicemail by using the Marginal Gains hotline at 317-343-4506. Take it away, D. Sweet.
Okay, well, that's a fun one. Yeah, I think we covered, or we talked about patches a while ago, but the boot is a different story, and I think it's interesting to think through. So theoretically, if you patch the tire, you're adding extra butyl rubber, a high-ish hysteresis material, in that spot. So theoretically, you're absolutely increasing rolling resistance in that zone because the hysteresis has gone up. You will probably actually increase it less with a tire boot if the boot is a low hysteresis material. And like a goo packet, you're going to get some slippage probably of the casing relative to the inner tube. But the boot itself is probably incredibly efficient. It's not a high loss material at all. It's like a mylar or plastic. And actually, if I think about it, you probably similarly with like a dollar bill. You throw $1 in there, and that's as long as it's not folded over on itself too many times, that's probably reasonably efficient as well. So, I think if you're in that situation and that's what's getting you home, I don't care how much rolling resistance it's adding, but it certainly is a fun one to think about theoretically. That yes, a flexible, low hysteresis boot material is probably better than a patch.
Very interesting. I would not have expected for the answer to go that way. How fast can you change a tire, Josh?
Oh, God, fast.
Give us the number in seconds.
Oh, less than a minute.
Wow. How about you, Eddy?
Well, tubed or tubeless?
Let's say tube.
Yeah, that's good. That's
okay, good. Because tubeless is a mess. Yeah. Like I get in there and I wipe out all the excess sealant before I put a tube in. So I kind of take my time with tubeless. Tubed, as long as it's not a Conti gator skin, which can be a bear to get off. I'm in the 2-minute range, 2.5-minute range, probably. If I'm in a real hurry, yeah.
So I would lose by far in the tire change contest. Oh, and the Conti gator skin thing, man, that I'm having a PTSD moment just from that. That is the only tire that has ever made me take make the call of shame, where I simply was not able to get that thing off.
Yeah.
It was just impossible to change. Oh man. Oh.
Yeah, those are brutal.
Oh, absolutely. So here is oh, sorry, guys. No, okay. I was checking to see if this was me or if this was you, Eddy, or what. Okay, so it looks like it's this one's me. So here's a great fundamental question brought to us by Matt in the UK. The question is regarding the rule of 105 and rim width at brake track and max rim width, or specifically, which of these does the rule of 105 recommend to use as a measurement? I'm a British time trialist trying to make the best of marginal gains as I get older. I've just turned 50 this year. Welcome. And my best out and back 10-mile time trial was 19 minutes, 55 seconds this year. That is, I'm doing the math real quick. That's an average close
fast.
to 30 miles an hour. Is that right? Holy cow, that's great. The front wheel I use most is a DT Swiss/Swiss Ride 62 millimeter rim depth spoked wheel. The rim width is 23 millimeters at the brake track and 27 millimeters maximum width. I have 2 tire choices for this wheel, 23 millimeter and a 25 millimeter tire, which incidentally measure at 23 millimeters and 25 millimeters with the tire pressures recommended by the SILCA tire pressure calculator. If, for example, the tires were identical in construction, say a 23 and 25 GP 5000, which tire would you recommend for time trialing in the 46 to 50 kilometer per hour range?
Wow, that's easy. The 23. Yeah, so I think, and we can drop a link for the YouTube watchers. I have a video on sort of how I came up with the rule of 105 and what the thinking was, and we actually show some CAD models and things, kind of getting into that history. But yeah, the easiest way to think about it is you ideally want your tire and rim, if you were to cross-section it, you want that to be as blended together and smooth as possible, where the tire is the leading edge, the rim is getting wider and wider, and ideally your peak width is probably at the 50% mark of the section of the combined rim with tire. And so in the rule of 105, I never specifically stated whether it was rim width or at the brake track or max width. I guess it's more meant to mean max width, but you are always better to have your tire narrower than your brake track. And the fastest wheel setups all have tire narrower than brake track and brake track narrower than max rim width. This particular wheel, the DT Swiss 62, super, super fast wheel. And that wheel with a 23 millimeter, GP5000 TT, smoking fast. And you will pick up, in that scenario, more aero watts at that speed than you're probably giving up a watt in rolling resistance of that 23 to 25 tire, but you will pick up more than that if you're time trialing it at those speeds. So I would say that one is that one's pretty straightforward. Go with the 23.
So it doesn't depend? Is this our first ever?
Yeah, no.
This is our first ever answer
point.
that is not a. It depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he was specific
this
enough.
moment.
If he'd said like, oh, for general all-purpose use, he was like, oh, that gets a little bit harder.
Yeah. Did he say what the conditions of the road were? Like, if he was on nasty chip seal, would your answer change?
Yes, but I think the speeds he's telling us tells us that that's not the case.
Okay.
So when I hear what's the best for 50K an hour, okay, I can narrow the range of what that surface is going to look like. That is not a terrible surface.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't mean that it's perfect, but I think if that came in, the occasional chip seal, or I have an event that's on this worse surface, then maybe you start to lean towards the 25. And I think the decision I would have to make there is is the recommended pressure of the 23 is it too high? I guess Is it starting to put you in a place where it's just too feasibly high, right? If you say like, oh, this road surface is terrible, but you're or not terrible, but the road surface is less than ideal, but I can't run the 23 below call it 80 psi at my weight without risking a pinch flat. Then you're going to go to the 25, and so but that really becomes more of a pinch flat risk, a durability risk than it does a pure speed and rolling resistance risk.
Should he put a 25 on the back or the 23? We haven't really talked about back tires, so what's the rule there?
I wouldn't. At that speed, you'll benefit from the 23 and back as well.
Okay.
You get there's definitely a reduction factor on a rear wheel because it is in dirtier air, and the front. You think of the kind of the front top quadrant of the wheel is more or less shielded by the frame, especially in a modern TT frame. You're generally shielding the tire, but you are relying on. You think that the tire is the last thing that the air touches on the bike, and so if you can have your wake converging as it flows over the tire surface, you are going to leave a smaller wake behind that tire, and that's from the top of the tire to the ground essentially. So
Gotcha.
That's definitely one where. And again, at those speeds, if this was me doing the same time trial at my level of fitness, at 40K an hour, I would probably be making some different decisions. But if you're legit going 50K an hour, which he is, go for that 23.
Yep. Rule of 105, another popular topic here on Marginal Gains. In addition to chain waxing, there are other great popular topics that we cover here on this show regularly. Hey, this week's episode is also made possible by Buy Cycle. That's BUY Cycle, the largest global marketplace for pre-owned bikes.
Yep, with over 15,000 pre-owned and refurbished road, gravel, mountain, and triathlon bikes available. Bicycle connects buyers and sellers on a global scale and makes the process of buying and selling bikes safe, easy, and convenient.
With guaranteed buyer protection, secure payment, first-class services from carbon checks to refurbishment, Bicycle believes that your next dream bike does not have to break the bank and can still provide the quality and performance you desire for years to come.
Additionally, when you sell a bike, Bicycle provides a bike box and packaging materials directly to your door and coordinates pickup at a time that works best for your schedule.
For a limited time, you can enter the code MG23 at checkout for free shipping on your next bike purchase. Nice. So if you are considering a pre-owned, so if you're considering... For a limited time, you can enter the code MG23 at checkout for free shipping on your next bike purchase. So if you're considering a pre-owned bike, check out buycycle.com. That's BUYcycle.com and find your next dream bike for up to 70% off retail.
Did you guys know that Bicycle is the largest global market for pre-owned bikes? I didn't know that.
I did not know
Now we
that.
know.
Now we know.
All right, here's a voicemail that
Knowing
came
is
into
half the battle.
Yeah. Here's a voicemail that came in via the Marginal Gains hotline. You can call or text that number at 317-343-4506.
Oh, I have not listened to this one. Can we?
And YouTube can't hear it either. Sorry, YouTube.
Can YouTube not hear that?
How would they hear it?
Oh, they get it. We get a separate audio track with this. Can you not hear this when I play it, Josh?
Oh, we didn't hear the other one. Did you play the other one?
I did play the other one, and you guys couldn't hear it?
Oh, yeah.
We
Nope.
couldn't hear it.
Nope.
No, I was wondering if you
Oh.
loaded
No, we
them
just
up
read
into
it.
the... Yeah, I listened to them before we all met, so that's kind of how I know.
I thought that everyone
Yeah,
was able to hear it as I was playing it. You know what? Here, I'm going to try playing it. I bet you can hear it this time because I just
Okay,
learned
hit it.
something.
Hi, Josh. Hi, Buddy. Hi, Hoddy. It's Oliver from Switzerland. I have a question regarding Josh Eddy Merckx bike. A while ago, Josh said he bought an Eddy Merckx bike from, I think, the 70s or 80s, and he had fun tweaking some marginal gains out of the bike, and I was wondering if you could share what it's been doing on the bike to make it fast, seeing that it's stuck with external cables and rim brakes and so on. So in other words, how do you optimize a classic road bike with modern gears in terms of marginal gains? Thank you for the great show.
Awesome. I love this question. And I mean, as most of the listeners probably know, and you guys certainly know, like I pretty much only own and ride old bikes, except for my commuter bike. And the easiest answer here really is tires, wheels, and drivetrain waxing and maintenance. So my old bikes, of which I have more than I tell my wife that I have. Don't tell her. If you listen to the show, don't tell her. They all live at work. But what I have done with my last handful of bikes, and I think we've got some YouTube videos of my Merckx. I've actually built some relatively modern carbon rims into the old school hubs. Mm-hmm. And actually, my Merckx, I had Nick James, master wheel builder at Zip, build that up with some modern 303 rims, and then I'm running some just very nice modern tires from Vittoria on there with latex tubes, and those can be really nice savings, both in terms of rolling resistance and an improvement in the aerodynamics. The other thing that will generally bring you is you can get those built up with the modern butted bladed spokes. So if you think back to the old days, if running bladed spokes, you had to slot the hubs. Your vintage bike probably doesn't have bladed spokes or slotted hubs, and nobody wants to slot a hub anymore. Not to mention it's not great for the hub from a structural perspective. But you can run something like a DT Swiss Aerolite or a Sapim CX-Ray spoke through an old school spoke hole. And so that, I mean, that can be huge from, especially actually looking at my, I've got my Le Mans TVT Carbon Tour de France bike from 1990 sitting here. It's a full C record Grupo. And actually, it didn't have wheels when I got it, and so I bought a set of C record hubs, which are all, of course, 32 spoke, but built them up with CX rays on some Zip 202 rims because you can't fit the 303s into Delta brakes. But the 32 bladed versus round spokes at 30 miles an hour is somewhere on the order of like 30 to 40 watts per wheel of savings. I mean, huge savings.
Wait, what did you say? What was that number again?
Oh yeah, like 30 to 40 watts per wheel.
Wow.
Savings. That many spokes, the spoke shape change, yeah, massive. Massive. And that's at 30. So obviously you scale it back. But yeah, I remember first time got probably 99 or 2000 putting a wheel like that in the wind tunnel and looking at both the drag change and the rotational power to spin. Holy smokes. Wow. You can cut the drag 25, 30% in pure translational aerodynamic terms, but you can cut the wattage to spin by way more than half. And 32 14 gauge spokes spinning at 30 miles an hour, that takes a ton of energy. So bladed spokes, a nicely shaped modern carbon rim, and then a modern tire with latex tube, or if you can find the right rim, modern tubeless is screaming fast. From a cable perspective, the kind of just clean them up, keep them short. Every 10 centimeters is a couple of watts. So, you're probably, if you can just kind of trim them up and keep them nice and nicely shaped, you'll be much better off. And then other than that, clean and wax the drivetrain. Remember that largely just cleaning your bike makes it faster. But wax chain and modern high quality, lower viscosity greases are another good way to just speed things up a little bit. And I do have to say I'm continually amazed, and I love to kind of blow the minds of the young kids that work here with, I've got 40-year-old Campy record and C record bottom brackets, and they spin 3 times longer than the modern fancy ceramic because there's no seals.
Yeah,
right. And so it's not great for riding in the rain, but with the right grease in there and the right kind of care and maintenance, man, the frictional drag of these old bikes is phenomenally, incredibly low, just because of how they were made. And so it's really then just becomes a staying on top of it and maintaining it. So enjoy. Love that question.
Fantastic.
I can't imagine Eddy Merckx on his old frame with your new wheels. That would be mind-blowing, what he would have done.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One last question, and this one is near and dear to my heart for reasons I think are going to be obvious in just a second. Like the question we just answered, this is a question about marginal gains in places where you would not normally expect them. Here's what Richard in Calgary asks. He says, I am a large rider, 6'3", 230 pounds. I have a great bike, a Bianchi with Shimano Dura Ace and NV wheels. Very nice setup. I hear your discussions on the importance of aero, and I'm tempted to pursue gains in clothing, bikes, etc., but wonder, would my size negate any aero equipment gains? It seems the industry is fixated on the 5'6", 140-pound rider. Does aero go out the window when a big guy is on the bike? As a comment, is a 5'6", 170-pound rider. The industry is focusing on people that are my height, but about 50 pounds lighter. So, he's absolutely, Richard is right about the fixation on height, but even lighter, right? Josh, do aero considerations get negated for racers who are tall or wide or especially both?
It's a great question, and the answer is no. Aero's probably even more important for you, and doing the right things because you're, we talk about CDA, right? And the things that we talk about doing most are things that reduce the CD, and your A is bigger, right? Your frontal area is naturally larger, and so you really need to focus on the CD piece of things to try to bring the whole system in line. So you think of things like wrinkles in clothing, right? Well, you have more clothing and much more surface area of clothing, so there's more opportunity for wrinkles. And so you can actually get these sort of stacking effects where, if one wrinkle is bad on a small rider, a rider with, 20% more surface area of clothing now has, say, 2 wrinkles, and that, is kind of like a little step function in worse than you're going to have with the smaller person. So, yeah, I would say as the riders get bigger, these things become, even more important, and particularly the bike position. You think of the good news for bigger riders is that the bike itself is a lower percentage of the total aero drag of the system. And so, but the flip side of that is it means the body is a higher percentage of the drag of the system. And so, it's even more important to work on optimizing your position, flatter back, horizontal forearms, kind of all of those, little details we talk about when we take riders to the wind tunnel. The bigger you are, the more important it is to practice those good behaviors, and also to just have that in the back of your mind that you are paying a disproportionate penalty, for a poor body position. But yeah, so I would absolutely focus on your helmet, your shoes, all the sort of marginal gains around aerodynamics that you can purchase, because those things will all work equivalently well on a bigger rider as a smaller rider, and then put the rest of the energy into getting that position just right, and then finding clothing that really has a nice cut and a nice fit with an absolute minimum of wrinkles. And I do think that's one of the, as I've put on weight as I've aged, I no longer feel comfortable wearing like a lot of the race cut stuff, because it just feels like it's accentuating all of my bulges and my belly, but those, it really works, right? Those race cut jerseys and things, they really are faster, and depending, they can actually be significantly faster. So I would pay attention there. And then the last piece of that to maybe think about, if you were racing or going for a Masters time trial championship or a something big. We've talked about it before, but the top riders, Tour de France level, all of that clothing is custom tailored to the rider. And it sounds a little bit crazy, but it can actually, in a lot of cases, be done not very expensively by a local tailor. If you find the right person who's open-minded to working with you, you can actually have it done locally. And I've sent a ton of riders. We actually have somebody that we used. Unfortunately, he's retired, but somebody here in Indianapolis that we had do custom clothing for some of the athletes that we work with, where we would set them up on a trainer, and they would do the little chalk marking thing, and then essentially just kind of nip and tuck and clean up and sew all around. And with those gains, those gains can be huge compared to the stock fit of clothing. So I would say, search for a brand that fits you really well, and if you can't find one that you're happy with, or you seem like you just have a ton of wrinkles or any looseness anywhere, I would break out the yellow pages, as we used to say in the old days, and see if you could find somebody to give you a little nip tuck, particularly in like the jersey, to get you where you need to be.
No follow-up for you, Fatty?
I am like, so what are the marginal gains of Ozempic, man?
I think they're high.
We could do a whole show on that. So.
Yeah.
Hadi knows. I mean, Hadi's a tall, thin guy who has crewed many times for a short guy with the nickname Fatty. And I am, I've ignored a lot of the marginal gains that I could get with a close-fitting jersey just out of vanity, right? But you make a great point. It may be time to say, okay, well, my body is what it is, and if I want to race, then on race day, I'm going to wear the close-fitting jersey, the aero helmet, and and I think more than anything, focus on my position for a good, fast aero race. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, before we sign off, I'd like to take a moment here to remember the first marginal gainer I ever knew. And I knew him long before I'd heard of the term marginal gains, and long before I became involved in cycling. Jim Lucero was the winningest crew chief in the history of unlimited hydroplane racing, and I'm proud to call him my uncle. Jim Lucero died recently at the age of 77. The boats Uncle Jim engineered, built, tested, and kept running won 10 Gold Cups and 8 points titles. He scored 69 victories over his career. In a 3-year stretch during the late 70s, he won 3 Gold Cups and 3 national championships. Of course, he's in the Hydroplane Racing Hall of Fame. And he did all of this against teams with much larger budgets. To beat the bigger money teams, Jim Lucero innovated and pursued gains wherever he could find them. He redesigned the rear wing of the hydroplane for better control. He got his boats to slightly lift out of the water without flipping, thus reducing drag. He started bonding boats instead of using rivets. And he turned the sport on its head when he moved away from piston engines and started using turbine power plants. Uncle Jim also brought about new safety measures to the sport. In a crash, the old way of thinking was to eject the driver from the boat. Jim Lucero believed the safer way was to keep the driver with the boat. He moved the cockpit in front of the engine and eventually enclosed it. Other teams followed, and the sport is safer because of it. Hydroplane racing, for sure, is a niche sport. The pickle fork boats with names like Smokin' Joe's, the Atlas Fan Line's Blue Blaster, and the Pay and Pack. It's hard to find someone outside of Jim Lucero's hometown of Seattle who is even aware of the unlimited hydroplane racing scene. But Uncle Jim didn't do it for fame or attention. He did it because he loved a challenge, he loved to innovate, and he loved the details that racing represents. Jim Lucero, a marginal gainer, if there ever was one. And I know I told my Uncle Jim about this show, Josh and Fatty. Unfortunately, his illness got to him rather quickly. And so I don't know if he for sure got to listen to it, but I'm sure he would have loved all the discussions we had here. One of my first wind tunnel discussions was with him. We were looking over one of his boats, and I said, boy, do you put this in the wind tunnel? And he said, yeah, we do some wind tunnel testing with the hydroplanes, but hydroplane racing is more about hydrodynamics than it was about aerodynamics, at least back then. So, but he was a fabulous guy, an innovator, and a true, actually, hero in the sport.
Amazing. Well, sorry for your loss, and he just sounds like an unbelievable guy.
Yeah, he would have been an amazing guest. Is that what
he
sounds like?
He would. Yeah.
I grew up. My dad was super into that world and drag racing. I grew up watching that stuff, on VHS recordings because it was on at like 3 a.m. on ESPN or whenever it was on. I absolutely know that world and those boats, and it's unbelievable the technology and the danger involved there. So,
yep.
Wow.
Okay, I know the show's supposed to be over, but let's fit in another chain-related question here. This comes from Nathan P. in Colorado in the Marginal Gains Podcast.cc comment section. He says, I'm wondering if there's any research into the potential marginal gains of a well-used chain. For example, when a chain is new, the lateral stiffness on the chain is high. However, after a few thousand miles, that stiffness decreases. If the chain still measures in spec with a chain tool, is it fair to assume that cross-chaining and tight wraps, say around a 10-tooth cog, don't do that, yield less watt consumption, that is?
Gosh, interesting question. I would say no. that as the chain wears, it will tend to wear imperfectly and unevenly, and so any gains to be had from, say, the polishing or the kind of wear mating of adjacent surfaces, any of that is going to be offset by the inconsistency of that wear. And in some cases, you really don't want surface polishing where you have sliding friction, like between your inner plates and outer plates on the side of the chain, because that increases the surface area and decreases the ability of the surface to hold the lubricant. And so you can think of it a little bit like, the cylinder bore in an automotive engine, or you'll notice this with stanchion tubes on suspension forks, that you actually don't want them polished, you want them honed, which is essentially gives you a surface that has a very tightly controlled surface roughness that is rougher than polished, but that allows the holding of the lubricant and reduces the friction, the sliding friction where sliding friction occurs. So I would say you definitely want to break a chain in, but once you actually start to wear the metal, it's downhill from there, and downhill in the bad way, I guess, not the good.
So in other words,
not the fun good way.
In other words, if you have somebody going for the hour record, the chain that they are running, you would have them run that chain in for a certain number of cycles before they go for the record?
Yeah, we run chains in for probably a few hundred K to remove any manufacturing imperfections or defects. And you think of, the complexity of a chain, it's, hundreds of pieces that have all been stamped and blanked and smacked with tooling. So you do have some inconsistency and some imperfection, like interior corners, things like that. You might have some unevenness of surface, or maybe varying surface roughness between, mating parts, because again, it's hundreds of parts being flung together at very high speed, usually like optically sorted, and then they're just being speed riveted together. And so, it's kind of cool, actually. You take a brand new chain out of the box and you put it on a rig and you just let it run in its factory grease for a couple hundred K, and you take it out and you run it through chain stripper, and you'll actually find little metal bits in the chain stripper after it comes out, and these are all these sort of little burrs and imperfections coming out of the chain, and then you wax it, and then from there on you really want to keep it. Ideally with the wax, you can kind of freeze the chain in that state. So it's like, here's a 200 kilometer kind of run-in D-bird chain, and now we're just going to continually wax it, and it's going to essentially stay a 200 kilometer run-in chain for thousands of kilometers. But yeah, so that's the kind of run-in that's optimal. And then as you start to drift past that, there become far more negatives than positives associated with that sort of surface wear.
All right, fantastic.
Fantastic.
I am trying to think of. There are a couple of pickups that I'm considering right now. For the first voicemail one, obviously the YouTubers are not going to hear because you guys couldn't hear it. So
yeah,
I was thinking I'm going to just go ahead and play that question, or do the lead in for that question now, and we can maybe splice that in for the YouTube version.
I would just send that audio to Phil.
Send the audio to Phil and have him dump it in.
Because he does run through these, and yeah, he whatever.
So don't
one of
tack
your
it on
Adobe
at the
softwares
end
that he
here,
uses,
but instead just give him the
I
audio. I'm just wondering what video
I
do
wouldn't.
people see when they're listening, when he has that audio going on.
You could probably cover it up with a little picture.
Oh yeah, we could throw some B-roll in there.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, the pause might even be long enough because I think
Correct.
I know I took
You took a second.
whatever 10 seconds to read it.
Here,
to read the question, but yeah, I mean, he could certainly either freeze us or throw some B-roll in there or slow it down, or he'll come up with something.
Okay.
But,
Well, how about if I just go ahead and put it in right here, and then he'll have it both in both places. He can either cut it out or not, or I'll also give him the audio. So
that's
we can
fine.
just
Whatever's easiest for you.
sit and listen for a second is basically what I'm thinking.
Okay.
As somebody who is aware of marginal gains, but also cares very much about sleep, how many watts do I usually lose by having a goo packet on the inside of my Vittoria Corsa 2.0 with a standard Beetle inner tube inside? Appreciate all the insight, guys. Ciao.
All right, there you go, Phil. Thanks, man. Also, I got an email from Alan, and he was saying that yes, of course they can just do the code MG15 at checkout, but he has also given us a shorter URL that we can use. So, I was thinking I would do my line that we can cut in for the audio for the ad. So here it is. Oops, wrong ad. There we go. I like the idea of that. After November 1st, holiday blend and gift boxes are available. Meantime, our listeners can get 15% off their first order by using the code MG15. That's a great discount. You can go to also perccoffee.com/MG15. And remember, of course, to use that MG code 15. Sheesh. Bunged it. Guys, I like the idea of that. After November 1st, there are going to be cool holiday blend gift boxes available. Make sure you check those out. Also, our listeners can get 15% off their first order by using the code MG15. You can also go to perccoffee.com/MG15 to get that. And be sure, again, to use that MG15 code at checkout. Of course, we're always interested in your questions. And one last time, here's how to submit them. Text or call the Marginal Gains hotline, 317-343-4506. You can also comment on this or any episode at marginalgainspodcast.cc, which is where you're going to see links to all the platforms for listening to the show.
Thanks again for listening to Marginal Gains, and we will be back soon with more questions and answers. Sometimes we might even have answers that aren't It Depends.
For the first
like we did on this
ever.
show, which was maybe a first. 32 episodes in, and we had I was actually able to give a definitive answer.
The first definitive answer.
Tune in to see if that happens again in the next episode of Marginal Gains.